Baik, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat siang semuanya, salam sejahtera bagi kita semua. Karena waktu telah menunjukkan pukul 1 tepat, mari kita mulai bersama-sama acara kuliah tamu pada siang hari ini. Kuliah tamu pada siang hari ini berjudul Coping with Indonesia's Mudflow Disaster. Sebelum memulai acara, izinkan saya memperkenalkan diri. Nama saya Vera Octavia dari jurusan Sosiologi 2018. Untuk beberapa waktu ke depan, saya selaku MC akan memandu jalannya acara. Dan agar tidak berlama-lama lagi, sebelum kita mulai acara, perkenankan saya memaparkan sejenak susunan acara kuliah tamu pada siang hari ini. Susunan acara kuliah tamu Coping with Indonesia's Mudflow Disaster. Yang pertama akan ada pembukaan sekaligus sambutan oleh Ketua Jurusan Sosiologi, yaitu Bapak Dr. Ali Maksum, MAG, MSI. Yang kedua, pemaparan materi oleh Bapak Anto Mohsin, PhD, selaku asisten profesor di STS Program Liberal Art di Northwestern University, Qatar. Dilanjutkan dengan tanggapan oleh Bapak Pratama Yudha Pradheksa selaku dosen sosiologi di Universitas Muhammadiyah Malang. Kemudian akan ada sesi diskusi tanya jawab dan terakhir akan ditutup dengan sesi foto bersama dengan seluruh peserta mengaktifkan kamera videonya. Sekedar menginfokan terkait presensi nanti akan dibagikan menjelang penutupan ya. Kita langsung saja memasuki acara pertama, yaitu pembukaan sekaligus sambutan oleh Ketua Jurusan Sosiologi kepada Bapak Dr. Ali Maksum, MAG, MSI. Tempat dan waktu dipersilahkan.
Baik, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat siang dan salam sejahtera untuk kita semua. Yang saya hormati narasumber, kemudian saya cintai, puji syukur alhamdulillah pada siang hari ini kita bisa bertemu di Zoom dalam acara kuliah tamu tentang politik lingkungan dan membincang persoalan politik lingkungan dan sumbernya ini terkait dengan eksistensi dan keberlanjutan hajat hidup manusia, terutama adalah generasi yang akan datang, sehingga persoalan isu lingkungan dan sumber daya alam ini harus betul-betul menjadi isu politik nasional ya, karena selama ini isu politik nasional masih dikalahkan dengan persoalan persoalan pilkada ya, kemudian bagaimana bisa menjabat 5 tahun lagi dan sebagainya itu, sehingga persoalan isu-isu akan sumber daya alam itu belum menjadi prioritas dari para politisi kita. Oleh karena itu, politik lingkungan itu bagaimana sebetulnya kita menggagas sumber daya alam yang kita miliki ini yang sangat luar biasa, yang merupakan berkah atau anugerah dari Tuhan, dari Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, itu bisa lestari dan bisa turun-temurun kita, tapi juga bisa dinikmati oleh generasi-generasi yang akan datang. Memang pada saat ini telah terjadi pergeseran ya cara memandang manusia terhadap alam. Kalau kita mengikuti paradigma berpikirnya August Comte tentang tahapan peradaban, yang pertama adalah pada masa teologis, manusia tunduk pada alam, sehingga manusia sangat sangat menjaga kelestarian alam, kemudian sesaji kepada alam, agar alam ini tidak marah, tidak rusak dan sebagainya. Kemudian pada tahap yang kedua itu tahap teologis, manusia sudah mulai bisa menjaga jarak dengan alam, sehingga kalau terjadi bencana alam dan sebagainya itu sudah bisa mencari asal usul atau penyebab dari bencana itu. Kemudian yang ketiga adalah tahap positif ya, manusia bukan lagi tunduk pada alam tapi manusia sudah bisa menundukkan alam. Nah, pada tahap yang ketiga inilah sebetulnya awal mula bencana ya, bencana yang disebabkan oleh manusia, oleh tangan-tangan manusia karena kekuatan kekuatan ilmu pengetahuan dan teknologinya. Itu yang menyebabkan eksploitasi sumber daya alam. Jadi manusia memperlakukan alam eh, meng, mengambil ya, atau mengeruk kandungannya yang luar biasa, kemudian setelah habis ditinggal begitu saja. Bahkan
Halo, di tempat saya putus, Mbak Genta. Suaranya putus tadi, Pak.
oh ya, terlempar saya. Nah, sinyalnya sempat hilang sebentar. Oleh karena itu perlu ada apa ini paradigma kembali, bagaimana cara manusia memandang alam ya, bukan sekedar memperbaiki kerusakan, tapi bagaimana manusia itu mencegah kerusakan. Itulah yang sebetulnya diajarkan oleh salah satu filsafat ya, yaitu filsafat perennial. Jadi bagaimana manusia ini memandang sakralitas terhadap alam, sehingga terjadi hubungan yang harmonis antara manusia dengan alam. Manusia tidak lagi mengeksploitasi alam, tapi bagaimana manusia ini uh, bisa bisa memelihara dan bisa mencegah kerusakan yang ada pada alam. Sehingga dengan cara pandang filsafat perennial itu pola pikir manusia terhadap alam tidak lagi menundukkan atau mengeksploitasi, tapi bagaimana manusia itu harmoni, menjaga harmoni dengan alam. Jadi itu pesan saya untuk kuliah tamu ini, bagaimana kita merubah paradigma cara memandang alam, bukan sekedar untuk memperbaiki kerusakan seperti yang terjadi saat ini ya, berbagai kerusakan luar biasa ya, mulai dari di Kalimantan ya, bekas-bekas eksploitasi apa ini batu bara yang ada di sana, kemudian yang nyata di Jawa Timur di dekat kita ada lumpur lapindo yang sampai saat ini masih masih terus memancarkan semburannya yang kemudian merubah ya apa ini ya geoekonomi ya, geoekonomi yang ada di Sidoarjo ya. Jalan tol bisa berpindah ya, kecamatan, orang satu kecamatan atau dua kecamatan bisa ter apa ini terusir dari tanah kelahirannya sendiri dan sebagainya. Ini karena kesalahan manusia memperlakukan alam. Oleh karena itu untuk memperbaiki sudut pandang itu perlu ada kearifan, yaitu yang sebagaimana saya sebutkan tadi, salah satunya adalah memandang kembali sakralitas terhadap alam, bagaimana di alam itu juga ada kesucian yang harus kita kita junjung tinggi. Demikian sambutan saya, dan mari dengan yang muslim mengucapkan basmalah, yang lain sesuai agamanya masing-masing. Ya, kita ucapkan Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Acara kuliah tamu politik lingkungan dan sumber daya alam resmi saya buka, dan terima kasih kepada Mas Nino atau Mas Anton Novenanto yang penggagas acara ini, Mbak Wida, kemudian Mbak Genta, dan juga terima kasih pada narasumber Mas Anto Mohsin, ya, Mas Pratama, Yudha, dan sebagainya. Juga partisipan, para mahasiswaku yang sangat semangat ini. Mudah-mudahan acara ini membawa manfaat, ya, terutama bagaimana kita bisa melestarikan sumber daya alam kita untuk generasi yang akan datang. Kurang lebihnya mohon maaf dan selamat mengikuti kuliah tamu. Apabila ada kekurangan atau kesalahan, saya sedang di luar kota tadi, agak sulit mencari sinyal ini tadi. Untung pas acara pas bisa, ya. Itulah jodoh bahwa saya ditakdirkan untuk membuka acara pada siang hari ini. Kurang lebih mohon maaf. Akhir kalam, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Nah, demikian sambutan dari Bapak Ketua Jurusan. Selanjutnya untuk rangkaian pemaparan materi dan diskusi akan dipandu oleh moderator, yaitu Bapak Dr. Pil Anton Novenanto, SOS MA. Untuk Bapak Anton Novenanto, tempat dan waktu dipersilakan.
Terima kasih, Mbak Vera. Saya akan beralih ke bahasa Inggris karena kita sebenarnya memplanning ini sebagai international lecture, jadi visiting lectures. So I am with Genta. We are having this course, politik lingkungan dan sumber daya alam, environmental politics and natural resources. This is not our first time doing visiting lecture. So in 2019, we invite Anna Pockenpol from Bonn University talking about plastics and the plastic oceans, how Indonesia is the biggest or the largest plastic consumer and also waste producer. In 2020, we invited Ruichiro Abe from Waseda University. He was talking about co-evolution of social and ecological, and he approached the politic of environment and natural resources from the perspective of Niklas Luhmann, the theory of system. And now I'm very happy to invite my friend, colleague, Anto Mohsin. He graduated from, he got his PhD from Cornell University in STS, and now he is become assistant professor of STS, Science and Technology Studies, of liberal arts program in Northwestern University in Qatar, delivering title. His title is Coping with Indonesia's Mudflow disaster. So at first we invited Anto for talking about energy, but it seems that he chose the topic which is very close or related to myself about the Mudflow disaster. And I remember that it was me who guide Anto of doing some interview with some informants in Sidoarjo, and he also interview somebody else in other places. So I'm very much involved in this title, his talk, and I'm very interesting to know more about what is the result of that activity. And I also very happy to have Mr. Pratama Yudha Pradheksa. He was also alumni of this department, Sociology of Brawijaya. He graduated from Virginia Tech University for his master in STS. I hope he can give some perspective about how citizen science, I mean, like how the victims or citizen can produce their own science in terms of industrial risk or environmental disaster. So I will give the floor to Anto Mohsin. You have how many minutes, Mbak Genda? I forget. 30 or 40?
30 minutes.
30, yeah. Okay. Okay, please. Anto Mohsin, the floor, the screen is yours. This is.
Thank you, Nino. Bapak Dr. Ali Maksum, Pak Nino, Bu Genta, Mas Yudha, dan para hadirin yang saya hormati. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat siang, salam sejahtera untuk kita semua. Di Doha belum siang, masih pagi, jam 9.16 karena ada perbedaan waktu 4 jam. Saya diminta untuk memberikan kuliah tamu ini dalam bahasa Inggris. Nanti saya akan beralih ke bahasa Inggris, tapi untuk pembukaan awal mungkin saya pakai bahasa Indonesia dulu. Terima kasih sekali lagi untuk undangannya pada kuliah tamu kali ini. Saya sangat senang untuk dapat bisa berbicara dan berbincang-bincang dengan para mahasiswi Universitas Brawijaya yang saya dengar sangat-sangat aktif dan sangat-sangat tertarik akan mata kuliah ini dan juga topik ini. Terakhir, sebelum saya mulai, tadi saya ingin mengatakan dan mendukung pesan yang Pak Dr. Ali Maksum katakan, kita harus evaluasi atau memikirkan ulang hubungan kita dengan alam dan lingkungan. Tapi kuliah tamu saya kali ini tidak membahas hal itu secara langsung, berkenaan tapi tidak secara langsung. Ini lebih merupakan bagaimana para korban lumpur Lapindo ini berusaha untuk bisa mengatasi keadaan mereka. So thank you again for inviting me, for having me. It is a pleasure and honor to be here. And I would like to share my slide now with all of you. Before I begin, I'd like to introduce myself again. Pak Nino has already mentioned a bit about me. I thought I would expand it a little bit more. I studied mechanical engineering as an undergraduate at City College of New York. It is part of City University of New York system in New York City. I earned a bachelor's and master's degree in mechanical engineering. And then I worked for a multinational company, General Electric rather, in its energy business. But after a few years of working, I decided that I want to pursue an advanced degree. And I learned about this very interesting, but also very challenging, a new interdisciplinary field, or relatively new, called Science and Technology Studies, or STS. Now, STS field is a burgeoning field, both in the so-called West and also in Asia. Unfortunately, in Indonesia, we still don't have any department that teaches this interdisciplinary field, but there have been more and more scholars and professors who have been taking interest in this field. I'm really happy to see that. There's, because this field is not yet taught formally in any university in Indonesia, there is yet a formal translation of the field. The best I could come up with is Kajian Sains dan Teknologi, to examine scientific development and knowledge production and technological design development and use in a broader context. I did my graduate study at Cornell University in the Department of Science and Technology Studies, as Pak Nino mentioned earlier. After graduating, I was fortunate to receive a fellowship, an Henry Luce Environmental Studies Fellowship for 1 year as a postdoc fellow at Hobart and William Smith colleges. The fellowship just required me to teach mostly and also continue to do my research. And I was also very lucky to have landed at my current position here, teaching at Northwestern University in Qatar, or we call it NUQ for short. Northwestern University in Qatar is one of 12 schools of Northwestern University based in Evanston, Illinois, in the United States. It is the only school that has a campus overseas. The other schools have campuses in Evanston or Chicago. So I've been teaching at Northwestern University in Qatar since the fall of 2015. I have a long-standing interest in the Mudflow disaster, at least since the fall of 2007 when I started my graduate study at Cornell University. And I attended a conference. It's called the Northeast Conference in mid-October 2008, which was held in Ithaca, where Cornell campus is located. And this conference helped me increase my interest in examining this mudflow disaster that was happening still in its early years at the time. In particular, at this conference, there were 2 Yale undergraduate students, mahasiswi S1 di Yale University, twins. Their names were Phoebe and Edwina Clark, who screened a documentary that they made in the months earlier called Lumpur, about the mudflow disaster. So this was something really, really interesting and intriguing. Yale University undergraduates, American students, went to Sidoarjo and interviewed several people and created a documentary. They took interest in this particular disasters. So that piqued my interest. I decided then to write a paper and presented it at the 8th annual East-West Conference International Graduate Students in East-West Center International Graduate Students Conference in Hawaii in February 2009. So here's a photo of me at one of the conference venue at that time. How did I research and write about the mudflow disaster far away from Sidoarjo? Thousands of kilometers away from Sidoarjo. When I presented my earliest findings at the East-West Center Graduate Students Conference in February 2009, I haven't yet got a chance to visit Sidoarjo. Well, I did what is called archival research. meaning I tried to find and read sources in libraries. So not just finding resources or sources online. And I also collected and read what other researchers have written. And I shared my manuscript, a draft of my paper with colleagues to get their input. And like I mentioned earlier, I also tried to present my finding at conferences because it is useful to get input and feedback from the conference participants. Eventually, I managed to visit Sidoarjo in December 2016 with Pak Nino's guide, as he mentioned earlier, and got a chance to interview a number of people there. So libraries. This is a photo of one of the libraries at Cornell University, the John M. Olin Library, or simply called Olin Library. In this library, or behind it, if you go inside and walk towards the back, there is a special collection called the Ekologis Southeast Asia Collection. A mark of a good library at a research university is that it has a wide range of collections in the library. And I was fortunate to be studying at this university that has this collection because the ECOL Southeast Asia Collections has many resources that I can find and read. For example, the Tempo English editions are available in the collection. I could just go in there and find and read. These are some of the scan pages of the articles in Tempo English editions. Here's also some other ones that I found, scanned, and read. And it's not just the Tempo English editions. Cornell University Library, the Ecologis collections, collected other magazines that are published in Indonesia and other periodicals such as newspapers from many cities, national as well as regional newspapers. So even though I was not in Indonesia, and at the time I had not yet visited Sidoarjo, I had at my disposal a wealth of sources to read about, think about this Mudflow disasters. Okay, this is a scan newspaper pages from Kompas that were also available in that library. There are also other sources that I managed to find and read, such as this books here. Okay? This is, again, a mark of a very good library, of a very good research university. Okay? A wide array of collections of sources that can be used by any member of its community, by students, by staff, even by professors, and especially by students and professors. Of course, I did not just consult Indonesian language sources. I tried to find and read English language sources as well, such as these articles in Nature and in other periodicals such as The Economist and other journals. Because of the nature of disaster, it's been going on for almost 15 years now. There's also wide coverage of these disasters in foreign media. This is another source that I also read about, and use in my research and writing. And of course, scholarly articles or journal articles from scholarly journals such as the journal Indonesia, Bulletin of Indonesian Economic Studies, and here the third one is an article by Cornelis Lay published in Southeast Asian Survey. These are just samples of the many sources that I have collected and used in my research and writing about the Mudflow disaster. I also was lucky to have the opportunity to teach not just one, but two undergraduate courses on disaster studies or disaster science and technology studies, actually. So as part of our training as a graduate student, we were asked to come up with a course design and teach it ourselves. The first course I taught was in the spring of 2011. And then I got a chance to teach a modified version of the course in the fall of 2013. So researching, teaching have helped me a great deal in understanding this particular mudflow disaster. This is a photo of me presenting the talk that I'm going to elaborate in a minute at a socio-technical resilience workshop in June 2016 at Nanyang Technological University in Singapore. Presenting your findings at conferences, national, regional, national, or even international, would also help in refining your understanding, argument, and writing. And then I met Pak Nino and also Mas Yudha in, I think, August or July 2016, and I expressed interest in visiting Sidoarjo, which I finally did in December of 2016. Here are some of the photos I took when I visited the area. I even got close to the center of the eruption against Pak Nino's advice. And then, unfortunately, sank into the softest part of the mud. I kind of ruined my shoes and pants, as you can see there. But I was okay otherwise. So some key takeaways about what I have just presented. Good access to a variety of sources matter when you try to research any particular topic. One of the aspects that make a university a top research university is an excellent collection and use of its libraries and library materials by its community members, by students, by professors, by staff. So when you try to write a topic, I would highly encourage that you also go visit libraries. Don't just find sources online. There are many good sources that you can find in many libraries actually in Indonesia. And there's a new online library catalog called Indonesia OneSearch that you can use to type any keywords to find any sources located in any libraries across Indonesia. Now, write down your ideas and argument, and don't forget to present to get a feedback. And when you publish your articles, bear in mind that you do so to engage with the wider scholarly community. So based on what I've shared with you, collecting sources, reading them, examining them, presenting them, I have written 2 articles on the Mudflow disaster. The first one is available online. It's called The Sidoarjo Mudflow and the Muddiness of an Environmental Disaster. This was the inaugural article on terms of disaster collections of the Arcadia Journal, which is a component of the Environment and Society portal. This was a peer-reviewed article, but what's interesting about this article is that I have to write it within the limit of 750 words only. 750 words. Typically, journal articles are much, much longer. So I have to compress what I want to say about this in just about 750 words. The second article is this book chapter, which is the same as the title of this talk today, Coping with Indonesia's Mudflow Disaster, that is part of this edited volume or anthology called the Socio-Technical Constitutions of Resilience. And all of the articles, all of the book chapters in this anthology are a result of that conference in June 2016 in Singapore. So let me begin now discussing what I have written down in my book chapter. So, you know, I'm sure all of you know about the Mudflow disaster, so I don't need to introduce that to you. But what I would like to begin with is the government responses to this disaster, our government responses to disaster. I argued that the Indonesian government responses to the Mudflow disaster were slow, ambivalent, inadequate, and focused too much on infrastructure-related matter. And what they've done, for example, was to create the national team, or short abbreviated as Timnas, to handle this mudflow in the beginning by containing them in a pool. After working for about 7 months, the Timnas was dissolved and a new agency was created. It's called the Agency for the Mitigation of Sidoarjo Mudflow, the English translations of the BPLS. Again, the main task of BPLS was to contain the mudflow, okay? And to help relocate some residents whose houses and then villages were inundated by the mud, but mainly to deal with the mud itself, not quite with the people affected with the mud, although there's some components of that. But the focus was on infrastructure-related matters. Perhaps the focus on this was a bit understandable because the one heading it was Pak Basuki Hadimulyo, who is now our Minister of Public Works, right? His training and background and experience is all in engineering, and that's what he knows best. The Indonesian government also channeled the mud to the nearby Porong River to allow the pool to contain this increasingly bigger area of inundating bigger area. The Indonesian government also issued what it's called map of affected area, or peta area terdampak. Now, instead of really solving this issue, this map actually created anxiety, angst, and stressful situations for the victims. Why? Well, because the map produced or stipulated unequal compensation. But perhaps most importantly about the Indonesian government response to this disaster is that they did not expect that the mud flow could not be stopped. They tried and with a number of methods, but they couldn't stop the mud flow. So it's still with us today up until now. There's also this issue, I call it, and many other scholars call it, the trigger debate. Drilling hypothesis versus earthquake hypothesis. Okay? There's a debate as to the cause of this mud flow. What caused this mud flow in the first place? Well, on the one hand, there are those who support the drilling hypothesis, which contends that Lapindo Brantas's reckless drilling activities caused the disaster. Many academic scientists, such as Richard Davis of the Newcastle University, Michael Manga of UC Berkeley's Department of Earth and Planetary Sciences, and Mark Tingay of the University of Adelaide, support this hypothesis. On the other hand, there are other scientists who ascribe to this so-called earthquake hypothesis, arguing that the eruptions of the mud flow was triggered by an earthquake in the nearby city of Yogyakarta that had occurred 2 days earlier. Those who fall into the second camp, the earthquake hypothesis, are scientists who are affiliated with the Energi Mega Persada, the parent company of Lapindo Brantas, such as Nur Horakmat Sawolo and his colleagues, as well as Andriano Manzini of the University of Oslo, and his co-authors of an article published in 2007 at the in the Earth and Planetary Science Letters journal. So scientists are split, even though more scientists tend to agree or side more with the drilling hypothesis. Now, there's an interesting event or incident that's related to this debate. In October 2008, there was a vote done among the attendants of the conference held, let's see here, at the American Association of Petroleum Geologists meeting in Cape Town, South Africa. So the scientists in attendance were asked whether they believe in the drilling hypothesis or the earthquake hypothesis. 42 geologists believed the drilling activities was the sole cause. 3 geologists thought that the Yogya earthquake was the reason, and 13 geologists were of the opinion that both factors contributed, while 6 scientists could not decide. So scientists vary in their opinions, but the majority thought the drilling caused the mud flow. What's interesting about this event is the voting mechanism. This is not typically how scientists' debate is resolved. And I'm bringing my STS perspective here. Usually the closure of a scientific controversies is when one argument has been widely accepted by the scientific community. And this tends towards the drilling hypothesis. But by no means this debate is closed yet. Okay, there's still 2 camps, 2 schools, 2 arguments that are still arguing with one another. For example, Mark Tingay and his colleagues in a paper of 2015 still supported the I believe the drilling hypothesis. And there are scientists quoted in a New York Times article published in 2015 who disagree with what they say. So the debate is ongoing, in other words. These are some screenshots of the scientific papers published about these mudflow disasters and the arguments that they have as to the cause of this disaster. As you can see, they're published in a number of different journals. One, for example, is published in the Earth and Planetary Science Letters, and the other one in Marine and Petroleum Geology, and yet the other one in, for example, in Nature Geoscience. And there's some scientists quoted as well in this New York Times article published in 2015. Okay. So the debate is ongoing. So one of the strategies that the victims did to cope with the disasters was to take refuge at the new Porong market. The place, as the name indicates, was supposed to be a new place to sell and buy goods, a market. But because it wasn't open yet, some victims then took that as a temporary shelter. And they had to live with the unfortunate realities of the place. Many of their, for example, spaces are small and cramped, and there was little to no privacy at all. So what did they do to cope living in this temporary shelter? Well, some of them took up painting, so they would paint while staying here, and others find new jobs, such as becoming ojek driver or selling DVDs or VCDs, and other jobs that they could find. Others write, yet others broadcast radio programs. A new radio station was set up here, and some displaced people also vented on the radio station whenever they have the opportunity. A few refugees at the new Porong market also decided to create a kindergarten. They call it Muhajirin Kindergarten, to help with the small children with continuity in their lives. The parents volunteered to become teachers, some volunteers to create chairs and tables and other needed supplies for the school. There are even two foreigners who were backpacking in Indonesia who visited the new Porong market, and they donated some supplies and time as well, interacting with the kindergartners. So that's one way that they cope with this. There's also a documentary made and broadcast by Ari Trismana. The title of the documentary is Yang Tak Ingin Terbenam, and it was aired on the AAI TV, Dari TV. The other strategy that the victims used to cope with their situation is using the term lumpur lapindo. Okay? So the mudflow disaster has been called either lumpur lapindo or lumpur sidoarjo. Almost all of those I met and interviewed, for example, during my visit in December 2016, use or designate the disaster, the mudflow disaster, as lumpur lapindo. Okay? And lumpur lapindo is not just a coping strategy. Calling the disaster Lumpur Lapindo is not just one coping strategy. It's also an act of resistance. They want to fight the dominant narrative put forth by Lapindo Brantas and their publications and PR people who have been arguing that the Mudflow disaster was a natural disaster. So calling the disaster Lumpur Lapindo doesn't just point to a particular culprit, but also try to denaturalize the so-called natural disaster. Now, those who have used Lumpur Sidoarjo argue that, well, this is a common way of naming disasters by associating it with a particular place, although the Sidoarjo district disliked this idea because, you know, it projects or advertises to the outside world that the whole of Sidoarjo was under mud. So they didn't like this. And some scientists who use this term deem this term more neutral. And others argue that this term calls attention to other actors who were involved in this disaster as well, such as the Indonesian government or the agencies associated with it. Okay? So there was a debate, but overwhelmingly, many victims, if not all of them, used to call this disaster Lumpur Lapindo as a coping strategy, but also as an act of resistance. Another strategy that the victims did was to create or form victim groups, a variety of victim groups. These are some examples. There's one called Paguyuban Warga Reno Kenonggo Korban Lapindo, or Pagar Lekorlap. Formerly, they were known as Pagar Rekontrak, opposing the contract offered by PT Lapindo. And then there is Gabungan Korban Lumpur Lapindo, or GKLL. Some members of GKLL form a splinter group called GPRES in support of presidential regulations. So even victims groups form were not all united. Sometimes there was the Tim 16 Perumtas, which consisted of members who accepted the cash and resettlement scheme because they felt that was what they needed and deemed fair enough. And the other one that's quite prominent was Korban Lapindo Menggugat, or KLM, who, interestingly, in 2014, during the annual celebration of this disaster, managed to create a pact with one of the two presidential candidates at the time, Pak Jokowi, who is now president, to help take care of their problems. Another way to cope with the disaster, this prolonged disaster, they hold annual commemoration of the disaster. Now, they may have been doing this since 2007, you know, the first quote unquote anniversary of the disaster, but I could only find the earliest media coverage of these annual celebrations in 2009. So since 2009, many victims of the Mudflow disaster had been celebrating or commemorating the disaster. What kind of activities that they did? Well, they did many kinds of activities. They did istighosa or pray collectively. At one point, they hit kantongan to rid of Betara Kala. This is in one of our Hinduism-infused legends. And they associated Abu Rizal Bakri in particular as Betara Kala, so they want to get rid of that. And they perform at People's Theater, created and throwing an effigy of Bakri into the mud pool, installing works of arts by Dadang Kristianto, statues, and also another art installation called Gombal, and install monument. Why did they do that? And this is, I think, the reasons they have been holding the annual commemorations of the disaster. One is to fight collective memory loss. Even though this has been an ongoing disaster, Indonesian media coverage has becoming less and less over the years. They find other things to write about. It has become a less interesting event for them to write about. Well, they're fighting against this collective memory loss. The Indonesian nation tends to forget this kind of disaster. They also want to enroll allies to support their cause, which in this case was to get fair compensations. And they also come and participate in these annual commemorations to just reunite with their neighbors within their communities, within their villages. They want to reminisce their lives before the disasters, what they were able to do. And they pray together for better future, vent angers as well, and frustrations. And in one year, in 2014, as I mentioned, they managed to make a pact with a presidential candidate. So these are some photos I want to share. This is the monument that they installed during one of this annual commemoration on 29 May of 2014. And this is a photo of the art installations by Dadang Kristanto, the statues, that in December 2016 was already up to the chest. I think maybe now all of them have been submerged. Another strategy that our victims adopted and used is to write about their predicaments. And this is the role of the Kanal newsroom that come into the picture. So there was a meeting in July 2008 in Jakarta of various NGOs and also some victim representations. And they talk and listen to one another. And they agreed that, okay, we need to help the victims in voicing their situations and also informing them about what's going on or the regulations issued by the government related to this disaster. One of those who was present in this meeting was Mujtaba Hamdi of Lapis Budaya Indonesia. So I spoke with him and he also shared a document with me that traces the genealogy or really a report of what Kanal Newsroom has done. So they decided to create this new newsletter called Kanal, Saluran Aspirasi Korban Lapindo, or Kanal Newsroom for short. And they published articles, photos, information, Lapindo 101, I think, included in the newsletters, and as well as train some who want to become writers and journalists and held workshops. They also sponsored publications of a book, which I will also talk in a minute. So this is a screenshot of a website, korbanlumpur.info, that the Kanal Newsroom managed at that time. Although I think the website address is no longer this one. It has been migrated. And these are some screenshots of the Kanal newsrooms that I managed to obtain, thanks in part to Pak Nino. Although I wish I could get a full archive of the Kanal newsletters. I couldn't get the whole editions. As you can see, it's pretty well laid out and pretty well presented with good illustrations and good photos as well. This is the Lapindo 101 article or series that I mentioned about. providing information, not just for the victims, I think more towards outside people, researchers, or generally those who have interest in this Mudflow disaster, okay, including this one here. Here's a photo included in the Canal newsletter of a workshop of how to write a blog, take photos for any who might be interested. Okay? So empowering some victims, young victims in this case, to voice their own stories. Okay. This is another screenshot of parts of the Canal newsletter. And this is the later design and layout of the Canal newspaper starting in 2015. And so this is a book that I mentioned. Canal Newsroom also sponsored the publications of this book. It's called 29 Cerita Menentang Bungkam, Aneka Suara dan Tunturan Korban Lapindo, Lumpur Lapindo. So the 29 in the title has a significance in that it points to the date this mudflow first occurred on the 29th of May 2006. Really, there are a variety of stories in this book, in this anthology, but a common thread is that they want to voice their conditions. They want to tell their stories. What's happened to them, what's been happening to them, what are some of the things they've been doing to cope with this disaster, and this helped them to cope with this prolonged disaster as well. Okay, so in conclusion, the mudflow disaster victims employed various coping strategies and took several initiatives. They marshaled resources that existed in their social, organizational, and institutional spheres. They used alternative media to voice their predicaments. They worked with sympathizers and allies toward achievable goals. In doing so, they interacted with the material objects in their surroundings to tell their stories. They fight collective memory loss. They try to fight collective memory loss. They use language to resist a dominant narrative of the disaster. They maneuvered within the social, political, legal, and economic constraints to get compensated fairly. And the larger lessons learned from this book chapter I wrote is that it is important to consider and pay attention to the social aspect of a socio-technical resilience. Okay? If you want to build a resilient society, a resilient nation, a resilient community, we need to also pay attention to the social dimension of the social technical system, not just the built environment. The built environment is important, but also the social dimension of it. And there's a term in science and technology studies called socio-technical system. Okay, we are part and parcel with our built environment, with our technological system. We're not separate from them. So when a disaster occurs, or to prevent disasters in the future, we have to think about both the social and technical dimensions or components of our built environment. Disaster prevention should help prepare societies to be less vulnerable and cope with disasters. Okay, again, the attention to the social aspect of socio-technical system. And finally, disaster mitigation should also focus on how to rebuild individual and societies, not just the physical landscapes and material conditions of the victims. Okay? Having a new house, of course, is important for these victims, these displaced victims, indirectly affected victims, but also their well-beings as individuals and communities. Thank you very much for giving me your attention. And I know right now Mas Yudha will say something about what I presented, and I'll be happy to take any questions you may have both in English or in Bahasa Indonesia later. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Anto. This is very interesting. I just realized that explaining chronologically about the event is very important, because for me, I think this is like reminiscence, like recalling my memories that, oh yeah, that was happening at that particular. This is very interesting. And I would like to highlight the conclusion, one of the conclusion, of course, about the need of socio-technical resilience. And then I would like to invite Mas Yudha to give his comments or questions, maybe, I don't know, about Anto's presentations or talk. So please, Mas Yudha.
Okay, thanks to Mas Nino. Can you hear me?
Clearly.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Many thanks to Mas Nino and the University of Seri Department of Sociology for having me in this fascinating webinar this afternoon. And thank you to Mas Anto for your very interesting talk. And thanks to the audience for your time today. I recognize Kenta, Yudha, and the others friends here. So it's sort of a reunion with friends and former colleagues in the Department of Sociology. So I have known Mas Anto and some flocks at the University of Seri for years because I was a graduate from the Department of Sociology. So as a person who trained by Science and Technology Studies, STS, the talk is very relevant to me. And such talk, I think, is also important to challenge the normalization of the disaster. So before listening to Mas Anto talk, actually, I already read his article, Coping with the Indonesia Mudflow Disaster, in the book that Mas Anto mentioned, The Socio-Technical Constitution of Resilience, a new perspective on, I forgot the governing risk, I think, a few months ago. And the conversation today, I think, on the table now is, I think, ground on the book. So Mas Anto talk embraces the victim in coping with the impact and consequence of the Lapindo Mudflow disaster is important, I think, and promising as well, but theoretically and practically. So theoretically, I note some Mas Anto talk that promising in generating contribution to STS scholarship as well as the sociology of knowledge, studying individual, society, organization. I call counter expert that challenge the formal expert and dominant epistemologies is the strategic area of the theoretical interest for the STS, as well as the sociology of knowledge. So what I mean by counter expert here, so Mas Nino call citizen science, but I think it's more like citizen journalism, you know. But here is, I think, I mean the counter expert, the person who offer alternative interpretation of the disaster and its information to participate in the collective process of the imagining and producing counter imaginaries. So, and practically, I think inspired by Indian post-colonial scholars, Keadilan can often speak by seeking the victim effort in coping with the Lapindo Mudflow disaster. Mas Anto talk is part of the collective effort to encourage the victim to speak about their issue. And also, I noticed that the counter expert related to the Lapindo Mudflow disaster not just increase the public participation in the issue directly related to disaster, but powerful more the general issue of the fiscal responsibility, transparency, governance, and so on. So I highlight that. So in SPS literature, for example, the many successful contribution of the counter expert have engaged with the clinical trial with action, and then counter expert participated in public engagement, exercise on the energy choice and climate change, the Baron, and then citizen scientists who have collected the data about the pollution from the oil refineries in the community on Singer and so on, and managing. So for sure, I'm impressed with the victim capacity for coping with a lot of disruption caused by Lapindo Mudflow disaster. So I refer to Anto mentioned in his article, Informational Relation, which refer to the production, circulation, and utilization of the information by various individuals, community, group, and institution. So in the times of the crisis, the victim have the double roles, I think, in coping with uncertain condition and the bias information, which mostly come from mainstream media. The other note that I noticed from Anto talk, his presentation not only demonstrated how information is organized and managed, but also how it used to challenge another knowledge. So I was wondering if you also explore the motive, other than economy, of course, why the victim switched job or started a new job to sell food, snack, and become auto driver, or even become the VCD sellers. Are they using their new job to echo information about disaster to new people that they met? And I also wonder if you look at how the reader responds to the information that is produced by the victim. So I think it's important because it's related to legitimacy as well as the public trust, and how legitimate is the information of or the knowledge they produce. Today, of course, we have opportunity to speak through social media and blogspot and so on, but we still struggle to value different knowledge equally. So I call it the epistemic injustice. Talking the epistemic injustice, I think it's important to link on intersectionality, for example, gender, ethnic, migrant status, class, religion. So I think I encourage you just, if you're interested in disaster studies, I think it's important to put epistemic injustice as the pre-existing condition. So, for example, it's important to look at how gender and class related to legitimate knowledge or information that the victim produce. And then, so I think time is almost over. Lastly, did you also, Anto, take a look at the victim knowledge about the public health? For example, the air water pollution, for example, So I think we need to find a distribution of the ability level critic better to help governance or innovation, the management of in times of crisis, because the disaster is still ongoing on. Better incorporate knowledge beyond the formal expertise. So I wonder if the victim also ally with certificate expertise like medical doctor or whatever expert the activists and so on. So I think it's enough for me because the time is 14:15. So I turn to Mas Nino as the moderator. Okay. I will look forward to the discussion more. Okay, thank you.
Okay, before I ask the audience or collecting the question from audience, I would like to give Anto a very brief time to respond to Yudha's comments. The first is, I think, about victims as actor or agency to knowledge productions. And the second is about epistemic injustice. And then the third one is about what's next about the public health and the current situation, how this knowledge can be used to improve the situations.
Yes, well, thank you so much, Yudha, for reading the chapter I wrote carefully, and also for your really valuable comments here and questions raised. Let me quickly answer them so that we can give a chance to others to ask their questions as well. I already saw a few in the chat, and one person raised his hand. What are some of the motivations of some of these victims who took up jobs such as becoming an object drivers and selling DVDs, VCDs, and other jobs, other than economic reason to earn money, right, or to earn lost incomes? That's a very good question. I think it can be explored further. But what I suggest in the book chapter I wrote is that this is also a coping mechanism. Okay? Finding jobs while earning income also help deal with this prolonged, uncertain disaster that keeping them busy and a lot of times. There may be other reasons as well, which I did not explore. But my article suggests that this is a coping strategy or mechanism. What are some readers' reactions and responses of the Kanal newsletters? That's also a very good question. I wish I knew who the readers was or can reach out to them, but I have very little idea. Okay, these are the copies of newsletters. From what I learned, are printed and distributed in several areas, mainly, perhaps initially, for the victims themselves. Okay, and some copies have managed to make their way to some academics or researchers or outsiders who want to learn more about this disaster. And to me, I can only speak on my own behalf, of course. What are my reactions and responses of the Kanal newsroom? Well, or Kanal newsletter, they serve as an alternative media, alternative knowledge production, even, right? To contest the dominant ones that have been flooding the media landscape made by PT Lapindo Brantas, for example. So that's my own reactions. Did I take a look even more closely on the victims' knowledge production? Well, other than the citizen the citizen journalism that you referred to, right? I looked at stories that they wrote that were compiled in one edited volume. I also noticed that they wrote programs and broadcast that programs over community radio stations. That's also a form of knowledge, even though unfortunately I couldn't get any recordings or access to recordings of this broadcast radio. I only have mainly textual materials. Some of them also participated in the making of documentaries, such as the one that I mentioned. So these are, I would also argue, type of knowledge production done by the victims. Perhaps not the kind of knowledge production, sophisticated knowledge production necessarily that others produce, such as those scientists in their articles in scholarly journals, but still knowledge production nonetheless. So there's still epistemic imbalance, I would say, epistemic imbalance that yes leads also perhaps to epistemic injustice, but certainly there's an epistemic imbalance. There's a term in STS called civic epistemology, or knowledge produced by societies, by people about their conditions, the kind of disasters that befell them. And this is, I think, one attempt to produce such civic epistemology, which they can expand further, actually. There's still some issues left, right, to deal with, social, environmental dimensions that are still have not been addressed. Those are some of the next steps. Thank you.
Okay, I see 2 questions in the box and then 1 raised hand. I think I would like to hear Mr. Bambang Catur Nusantara to raise his questions, and then I will read the questions in the chat. Please, Mr. Bambang Catur.
Yeah, thank you, Nino. Hello, Mas Anto. I think we met some days in 2016 in Besuki. Well, I'm really interested with your conclusion about how the disaster mitigation should not focus on the physical only, but need to focus to rebuild individual and societies. Well, yeah, for all the participants to know that in 2019, Lapindo was given a new permit for next 20 years to explore and exploit the gas in Sidoarjo, so they can drill in any village nearby the Mudflow area. So I cannot. I wrote some question about the micro situation that based on that the local situation now, that there are so many new findings that we with a community do in recently about the heavy metals, about the hydrocarbons, and also about this is all about the environment. But also we find something something beyond our imagination, that there's also cases about the health issue, not only about the respiratory problem that we monitor since 2016, that 2006 that it was in the first rank of the disease in Porong health facilities. So what the newest one is that there's something of the issue in one village, more than 30 kids, 30 baby has this issue. Is it about the nutrient only, or is about the damage or the bad quality of the environment? in this situation, who's supposed to manage the situation? Because we know that the BPLS or BPLS only manage inside the what you call impact peta area terdampak. It's only that outside the peta area terdampak, no one or no institution that manage the situation. So the question how to survive of this community with the situation is about the complexity of the impact is beyond our imagination. Not only NGOs, I think, but company, even state, or even scientists in the university. I don't know how they can imagine the situation. They can imagine the impact. Maybe there, if you can share with us, is there any situation that the initiator of the activity of industrial has managed their or planned their own risk more in the energy sector? And I also has one question about the situation that why the government still give permit. Even we know in Java, PLN declared in 2019 and until today, I think, that the electricity was, I think, surplus for 40% already with all this supply from the power plant. So why they keep searching for the new source of this energy? Now the what you call panas bumi also they search for. Why they keep investing in the energy sector, and why they keep penetrating the people living space? So how they see the security of the people. So this is the question about the private planning. Thank you.
Yes.
This is the three questions.
Yeah. Again, the first two questions are related to Yudha's question here about. I'm pretty much curious how this bottom-up activism, both delivered by victims and activists, could call the government out. Yeah, this is the question that Chatur's raised, and how it affects the process of policy making. So, and then there is a question from Vikas. Vika, thank you, Mr. I have one question. Why there is a difference between Lumpur Lapindo and Lumpur Sidoarjo? Why people think that Lumpur Lapindo as a natural mudflow disaster, and why people think Lumpur Sidoarjo caused by actor? I don't know. I think you get the idea. So please.
Thank you. Yes, Mas Bambang Chatur, it's so nice to see you again, even though virtually. Technology mediating reunion here. I absolutely agree with you that there's still unresolved problems that have not been fully addressed of this ongoing disaster. As you indicated, the environmental, health, and social problems are still continuing. I think this would be a good way to learn more how individuals and communities have been dealing with this particular issues as well. I did not necessarily focus on these aspects in my research and article, but it would be nice to know, for example, if anyone would be interested in researching and writing about this. I know, for example, there's been some kind of awareness about these issues raised with communities. I took part in one such meetings with you and with Pak Nino back in December 2016. I remember that. And there may be other activities associated with helping victims addressing these problems as well. So this the consequences, the effects of these mudflow disasters, you're right, are complex and beyond the imagination of, well, many people. Okay? And as I pointed out earlier, the government thought they could stop this mudflow or think that the mudflow will stop, but it hasn't stopped. It's still spewing hot mud. Correct. Actually, this is a very good event, a very good topic. You know, this is me academically speaking, to research and write about and see how we or they in particular have been dealing with this ongoing disasters. There are other ongoing disasters as well in many other parts of the world, and perhaps we can also learn from what they've done there. It doesn't mean that what they did can necessarily be adopted by the Lapindo Mudflow disaster victims, but at least there may be some general lessons learned that we can adopt. I just learned about the fact that the Indonesian government gave Lapindo new permit to drill for the next 20 years in 2019. I essentially took a pause of looking at this particular disasters or observing it in 2017. There are other things that I've been doing. So this is news to me. And why did the government give this permit? That's also a good question. Well, you know, I don't know. Let's ask them. I don't have all the answers. Why? So to be honest, I can't really answer that question because I just learned about this from you. Why is it that they still keep penetrating people's living spaces, areas where people establish settlements, earn livelihoods? Yeah, those are very, very good questions. I have, you know, I don't have all the answers. I don't know. Perhaps like what you alluded to earlier, the reason is, well, this area is actually rich in fossil fuel resources that we can potentially use to produce energy. But is that a good reason? You know, right? Not necessarily. This goes back to what Dr. Ali Maksum mentioned at the beginning in his remarks, that we need to think critically here, our relations with nature and the environment. So I can't quite answer your question here, Mas Bambang Chatur, but because this is an ongoing disaster, I think more research is needed on disaster. What I would also like to add is that the research findings about the mudflow disaster has been dominated by scholars in what we would call STEM disciplines: science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Okay. There are a few humanities and social science scholars who have examined this disaster, but we need more. We definitely need more. So those of you who are studying sociology at University of Brawijaya, Universitas Brawijaya, can potentially look into this matter more, trying to find the answers of some of the questions that have been raised before. Okay? So we need more humanities and social science researchers to understand better of these mudflow disasters. And one thing I also would like to add, we are still eclipsed by researchers from outside of Indonesia. Okay? Non-Indonesian researchers examining this. I mean, I'm not saying that they shouldn't do it. Of course, we welcome any researchers who want to study this and contribute knowledge, useful knowledge to this disaster. But there's been little interest, it seems, by our own researchers bringing our own perspective, concerns into disaster studies research. Now, going to Yudha's question, thank you very much for your question, Yudha, that you wrote in the chat. And thank you for listening and being here. That's a really interesting question. One result of this, their bottom-up activisms, as I mentioned, was that they were able to influence one of the presidential candidate who later became Indonesia's president in helping them deal with their situations. I think it was in 2015 or late 2014, after President Jokowi was sworn in, he decided to take up the so-called dana talangan, right? And use government funds to pay out the remaining victims who didn't get anything yet at the time, holding Lapindo Brantas properties as collaterals. That's how I understood. So there's one result that the victims felt with their activism, and this annual remembrances of the Mudflow disasters would also have similar impact, I think, and I hope as well, because it helps not just people in the area, but also the Indonesian nation that, hey, this disaster is still happening. It's not over yet. There's still many unresolved issues that need to be addressed. And in this regard, allies, typically people from NGOs, but also others, can help support them in achieving their goals and their cause. How can this affect the process of policy making? Well, that's a really tough question, to be honest. There's still a lack of influence or lack of impact of the many studies that our academics have been producing, sadly. Okay. They're just printed in journals and books and placed in library shelves collecting dust. Maybe once in a while being discussed in class, in the classroom, but rarely do these studies make their way into the government inner circles. So maybe we need to do a better job of communicating these findings to people who matter, in this case, decision makers. And Fika question. Hi, Fika. Good to hear from you. So the difference between the term Lumpur Lapindo and Lumpur Sidoarjo are as follows. Lumpur Lapindo is used by many victims of this mudflow disaster as, I suggest, a coping strategy, a coping mechanism, a way to deal with the situations, and also as an act of resistance. It points to Lapindo Brantas, the company, okay, as the culprit of the cause of this disaster. It helps denaturalize, meaning argue against the natural cause of this disaster. Because what they've been trying to say is this mud flow was caused by the earthquake. It happened naturally. It's not necessarily had anything to do with what we did or what we were doing. So you cannot blame us for that. That's what they've been trying to say. And saying or using this term argues against that. But there's also a term for this mudflow disaster, Lumpur Sidoarjo, who's been used by For example, some academics who feel that this term is more neutral. Okay? They don't point to a particular entity, and also raise the awareness that it's not just Lapindo Brantas who we should hold accountable, but there are other organizations also that we need to account. Okay? So that's the difference between the two terms.
Okay, thank you, Anto, for the response of the questions. I will give some, there is a question, but I will give Yudha's few sentences to respond to the questions or comments, please, Yudha.
Okay, thank you. I think I comment the question or
about the questions, the question from the audience.
okay. Oh, yeah, I see on the chat from. I think the question is for Mas Anto, not for
Okay,
me.
so you don't have any response from them. Okay, okay. I will continue to Ani. There is a question. Mau izin bertanya, seperti apa upaya perusahaan dan pemerintah dalam menciptakan coping strategy bagi korban lumpur? This is a question. If there's anyone else to raise the question, apakah ada yang mau bertanya yang lain? Tidak ada? Oke, please, Anto.
Ya, jadi pertanyaan dari Anik Susanti ini bagus sekali. Apa upaya perusahaan dan pemerintah dalam menciptakan atau mengusahakan coping strategi bagi lumpur? Nggak banyak, sayangnya, karena seperti yang tadi saya sudah sampaikan, mereka fokusnya adalah untuk mengumpulkan atau berusaha supaya lumpur ini tidak meluap dari tempatnya sekarang ini dengan membangun bendungan yang besar sekali luasnya itu kan. Jadi mereka mencoba mengumpulkan lumpur supaya tidak menjalar kemana-mana, melimpah kemana-mana. Jadi fokusnya hanya ke landscape atau fisik lumpur itu sendiri. Secara tidak langsung, pemerintah ada peran juga sedikit dalam membantu para korban lumpur ini dalam mengatasi situasi mereka. Contohnya memberikan kesempatan untuk para korban pindah ke Pasar Baru Porong. Kan? Ada juga yang ditampung, saya dengar di pemerintahan, di salah satu tempat pemerintahan lokal setempat. Jadi untuk yang tidak bisa mencari tempat baru ketika rumah mereka terendam dan sebagainya, ini sangat membantu. Dan juga memberikan kesempatan untuk mereka mengambil keuntungan ekonomi dari apa yang sudah terbangun. Jadi misalnya pekerjaan-pekerjaan seperti menjadi tukang ojek, ya kan? Ini kan tidak diciptakan secara langsung, tapi ada yang menjadi tukang ojek, menjual pernak-pernik lainnya di sekitar bendungan, dan bahkan membantu turut menciptakan tempat lumpur Lapindo ini sebagai jadinya turisme bencana gitu bagi para korban. Dan pemerintah tidak atau perusahaan juga tidak melarang, jadi secara tidak langsung membantu. Mungkin satu coping strategi yang pemerintah lakukan secara eksplisit dan membantu banyak korban adalah janji Jokowi waktu jadi capres, bahwa dia akan membantu menuntaskan masalah ini dan terus memberikan atau mengambil alih dana kompensasi, dana talangan ini. Itu mungkin membantu banyak korban yang merasa tidak pasti kapan saya dapat ganti rugi atau ganti untung ini dan sebagainya, karena mereka ingin melangsungkan kehidupan mereka. Tapi sayangnya tidak ada strategi khusus, strategi yang sistematis, program pemerintah yang membantu para korban ini. Jadi misalnya, kan ada banyak anak-anak yang putus sekolah karena sekolahnya terendam. Tidak ada misalnya usaha pemerintah yang membangun sekolah baru, menampung para murid yang sekolahnya terputus itu, misalnya. Atau mengirim entah itu relawan atau mungkin pejabat pemerintah sendiri untuk melakukan survei terhadap kondisi psikologis para korban. Yang ada dilakukan oleh 1 atau 2 orang akademik saja, ya, bukan program pemerintah. Karena mereka merasa atau memprioritaskan mengatasi lumpur lapindo ini, luapan lumpur lapindo ini, ketimbang bagaimana caranya masyarakat komunitas menghadapi bencana ini.
Okay, I see there are some questions here. Ada beberapa pertanyaan di sini dan one raise hand. I will give the floor to Olin first.
Oh, saya baca ada satu komentar ini menarik sekali dari Mai. Halo Pak Anto dan kawan-kawan semua, saya mengusulkan menggunakan istilah penyintas dibandingkan korban, karena seperti yang Anda sampaikan, mereka juga bereaksi tidak pasif, mereka melakukan tindakan secara individu dan komunal. Mereka punya agensi ya. Makna ini penting, memberikan makna pada apa yang mereka lakukan untuk bertahan dalam ketidakpastian. Terima kasih banyak. Saya baru dengar istilah ini, penyintas. Apa itu artinya penyintas?
Survivor.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So we are, survivor itu diterjemahkan dalam bahasa Indonesia menjadi penyintas.
Oke, baik. Terima kasih banyak atas usulannya. Sangat bagus.
Oke, mungkin Olin.
Thank you very much, Nino. I am sorry I'm not really, a bit late, but it's very interesting listening to the discussion here. And maybe I a bit disagree about the statement from Anto about the government and company helping the survivors, because I think it's part of the responsibility, not that they it's like you're putting them out from this disaster. In fact, they are in that they created it, because why I can say this, because if you read a report from BPK, you can see that they neglected the obligation to monitor, to check, and everything. They just you can read it in that report that it's part of their responsibility, that, and that's not enough. I think the response is not enough. It's not adequately because it's if you see from the policy, it's they the one that give the permit to dig and everything that it should include in the package. I think it should include in the implementation of a big mass technology implementation that is also they have to prepare if something happens. It's the contain the risk. They really they said over and over that it's okay. This is okay. We can implement it. It is safe. It's mean that they should have the the protocol if something happen, or not to make it happen, but if it's occur, you should do so. Yeah, there should be a protocol, but it is not. So it's I don't think it's fit if we say helping the survivor is their responsibility. I think only that. The rest is okay. Sorry, sorry. I a bit because I've been there for 1 year. I also did the research, and yeah, maybe this is my guilty feeling because I have to write about it. But you know, okay, yeah, that's my only that.
Okay.
Yeah, about.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Alin. There is one. May is raising her hand.
No, if I could,
yeah, please.
Response to Bu Olin. Bu Olin, I switched to Bahasa Indonesia in a moment here. It's okay to disagree. Don't be afraid, and don't apologize. It's okay to disagree as long as we do it well. So actually, I have no arguments about on what you said. So I think you wanted to clarify what I said earlier when I said, perhaps the government, the perusahaan dan pemerintah membantu para korban secara tidak langsung. Tapi Bu Olin bilang enggak, saya tidak setuju. Itu merupakan tanggung jawab pemerintah. Okay, fine, that's good, that's great. It's okay to disagree. Dan saya setuju. Tapi ya kenyataannya kan pemerintah dan perusahaan tidak banyak melakukan dalam hal ini membantu penyintas mengatasi korban ini. Jadinya yang saya analisa adalah apa yang dilakukan korban, bukan mencari alasan kenapa pemerintah tidak melakukan atau dan sebagainya, tapi lebih ingin mengetahui apa yang para penyintas telah lakukan. Jadi begitu. Terima kasih.
Oke, Mai?
Terima kasih Nino atas kesempatannya. Pak Anto dan kawan-kawan, nama saya Siti Maimunah. Saya sedang belajar di Universitas Passau. Beberapa bulan terakhir ini, setidaknya awal tahun ini, Nino, Catur, dan saya sedang mendiskusikan ini sebenarnya seperti refleksi ya. Ini sebenarnya kita menghadapi apa gitu berkaitan dengan bencana lumpur lapindo ini. Kenapa 15 tahun tetap tidak selesai, dan konteks politiknya itu masih kental begitu. Jadi kalau bagaimana mengemas kawasan itu menjadi, kalau tadi disebutkan lumpur Sidoarjo itu masih disebutin gitu ya, mengemas kawasan itu seolah-olah agar cerita awalnya itu menjadi berubah, nggak didengar lagi, itu terus kental gitu. Jadi kami sedang mendiskusikan tentang bencana industrial sebenarnya gitu. Kalau tadi merespon apa yang disampaikan oleh Kakak Olin dan yang tadi disampaikan juga oleh Pak Anto. Jadi ini sebenarnya mungkin sebuah taksonomi tersendiri begitu yang memang bangsa ini mungkin belum siap gitu menghadapi yang seperti ini gitu. Karena dia historical gitu ya. Dia beda dengan yang tiba-tiba gitu. Ada ciri-ciri awal yang terjadi sehingga saat itu kejadian bahkan orang tergagap-gagap, pemerintah tergagap-gagap, baru 1 tahun ada penanganan resmi dengan kepres dan sebagainya gitu. Saya hanya ingin membawa pada forum penting ini saat mendiskusikan kasus ini, mungkin penting membawanya dalam dimensi lain yang karena kita ukurannya pakai bencana biasa yang itu harus ditangani pemerintah dan seterusnya begitu. Tapi konteksnya sebenarnya memang ini bencana industrial yang tidak siap gitu. Rakyatnya juga nggak siap karena memang nggak disiapkan untuk menghadapi sesuatu yang luar biasa ini. Pemerintahnya, NGO-nya juga gitu. Kita tahu di awal justru militer yang dikerahkan dalam kasus ini gitu ya. Nah ini kemudian membuat kami juga merefleksi bencana-bencana yang historical di Indonesia, kayak misalnya Kalimantan Selatan, kenapa banjirnya sekarang gitu, atau Kaltim misalnya itu terus menerus sekarang gitu. Jadi ini sebuah proses yang sedang sekarang kami tekuni. Sangat senang jika kawan-kawan yang berminat melakukan penelitian di Universitas Brawijaya juga meletakkan taksonomi ini sebagai bencana industrial ini bukan sebuah bencana yang biasa yang tidak mampu diurus secara biasa gitu. Terima kasih, Pak.
Okay, there is one question in the box about foreign university have more resources on Indonesia than Indonesian university itself. So this is so ironic. Science magazine, for example, Pak Anto could read it free in Cornell University, but now here we have to buy it, and there is even spend little time in wrote undergraduate thesis, but I could find better resources online. How we coping with this? I mean, this is a question from students, and are online resource enough to do archive on literature studies?
Yeah. Yes. Before I answer Fitri Widowati's questions, I'd just like to respond just a little bit to Bu Mai. Thank you very much for your comment, Bu Mai. Yeah, perhaps you're right. We need to come up with a new taxonomy, as you said, or a new way of thinking about this. But I can share what many disaster studies scholars have written. So in the literature, what many have raised, and this is very important, I think, what many have argued is there's no such thing as natural disaster anymore, okay? Because of our tightly intertwined relationship with the environment and also with our built environment. Okay? So at some point, unfortunately, we may experience disaster whether we are prepared or not. But what I'm trying to suggest based on what I presented today is that, well, yeah, disasters will occur, it seems, inevitably. It becomes what Charles Perrault called a normal condition or occurrence, meaning it's not normal in the sense that they happen regularly, but it will happen inevitably because of our intertwined connection with our nature, environment, and built environment. So what can we do? Well, we can do several things: reduce vulnerabilities and increase resilience. And what I presented is one way, a suggestion to increase resilience, to be able to cope or bounce back. By no means the only way or the only strategy, but one suggestion or one way. Now, let me answer Fitri's question. Yeah, it's really, really sad to see this condition that it seems that foreign universities have more resources on Indonesia than Indonesian university libraries itself. I think one way that
Sorry, I think there is a mute.
Oh, saya tadi ngomong tapi nggak kedengeran ya. Baru sadar. udah bicara panjang lebar. Oke. Saya harus ulang kembali nih. Oke. Pertama-tama saya sebelum menjawab pertanyaan Fitri, saya memberikan respons cepat saja.
Yang Mai tadi sudah. Mungkin yang Fitri tadi.
Oke. Ya, so Fitri, salah satu cara adalah menjadi anggota Perpustakaan Nasional Republik Indonesia. Oke, kalau sempat datang ke Jakarta, misalnya nanti kalau pandemi sudah reda sedikit atau sudah berkurang, sempatkan datang atau jadikan tujuan utama ada Perpustakaan Nasional Republik Indonesia di Jalan Merdeka Selatan. Menjadi anggota itu gratis, tapi manfaatnya besar karena bisa mengakses koleksi digital dan juga jurnal-jurnal yang dilanggankan oleh PNRI. Itu satu cara. Kedua adalah menggunakan katalog online Indonesia One Search di Google saja, Indonesia One Search. Jadi kalau misalnya ingin mencari artikel buku tentang satu topik memakai online digital database ini, kita akan tahu di mana buku itu tersedia di Indonesia. Misalnya di universitas, bisa ditemukan di Universitas Brawijaya, tapi juga bisa di Universitas Andalas, bisa juga di Universitas Patimura. Ya. Dan kita bisa gunakan jaringan pribadi atau jaringan profesional, atau jaringan akademik untuk membantu mendapatkan materi itu. Jadi mungkin memang universitas Indonesia secara individu koleksinya tidak atau belum sebagus universitas di luar. Tetapi secara kolektif kita se-Indonesia sebenarnya punya banyak sumber-sumber yang kita bisa akses dan gunakan. Waktu saya melakukan penelitian untuk ini, topik ini, dan juga untuk disertasi saya agak kesulitan cari datang ke perpustakaan yang belum ada katalog dan sebagainya. Tapi sekarang dengan adanya Indonesia One Search itu sedikit membantu. Dan bisa juga misalnya kontak ke diaspora ilmuwan Indonesia yang berada di luar negeri seperti saya. Pak atau Bu, nama saya ini, saya misalnya mahasiswi di universitas ini atau peneliti di sini, bisa tolong nggak carikan artikel ini. Kalau ternyata universitas saya langganan, bisa diakses, dengan senang hati saya membantu.
Okay, we are now already 1 minute past 3, so because our plan is on the 3 o'clock. But I will give for the closing, I will give like 1 or 2 minutes to Yudha for
terima kasih. Aku singkat saja.
Ya.
Tadi ada yang menyebut tentang penyintas tadi ya, survivor. Tadi saya teringat artikel yang saya tulis itu tentang 65. Mungkin kita bisa mundur untuk bisa menjelaskan konteks bagaimana coping dengan Lapindo tadi dengan bagaimana kejadian di tahun 1965 ketika terjadi sebuah pemandangan massal terhadap yang dituduh komunis tadi, dan kemudian bagaimana mereka terus survive. Nah, malah kemudian sebutan penyintas ini, saya ingat waktu itu berdebat dengan orang dari mana, dari Jerman, itu bahwa kemudian mengkerdilkan orang-orang yang marginal tadi, seolah-olah mereka punya akses, padahal mereka adalah kelompok marginal di mana aksesnya terbatas. Maka kemudian itu tidak layak disebut dengan penyintas. Bukan survivor dia. Jadi seolah-olah itu mereka bukan marginal gitu. Jadi hati-hati dengan terms itu, bahwa kemudian kita harus melihat konteksnya ketika itu baik lagi tahun 1965. Itu saya Mas Nino singkat.
Okay, Anto, do you have some closing statement?
No, just good point, Yudha, for sharing that. Sekali lagi terima kasih banyak. Thank you very much. It's really a pleasure and honor to be invited to speak to all of you, to share one of my research findings at this forum. And I hope to participate in similar talks in the future. Pak Nino has already shared with me other talks as well. And thank you so much for your questions, your insightful thoughts, sharing them here. I appreciate it very much. Let's keep in touch if you like.
Yeah, thank you, Anto and Yudha. Thank you, everyone here. I would like to promote this event. So, jadi kuliah Anto hari ini, Anto's lectures today is only part of the long series of discussion about bencana industrial and keadilan ekologi, sosial ekologi. Dan tema bulan kemarin kita sudah mulai dengan Jonathan Lassa dari Charles University Australia, hari ini dengan Anto Mohsin dari Northwestern University in Qatar. Bulan depan kita akan berbicara dari Olin, Carolina Delimonte akan berbicara tentang tantangan pemulihan mental para penyintas Lapindo. Pada bulan Mei juga ada Philip Drake, dia akan berbicara tentang decolonizing Lapindo science. Jadi mungkin sesuatu yang partikular related dengan apa yang Anto sampaikan tadi tentang bagaimana knowledge, power, and legacies of misinformation. So this is something Interesting. And pada 25 Juni nanti akan ada Hendro Sangkoyo, School of Democratic Economics. Dia akan bicara soal dekolonisasi cakap bencana, potret forensik dan jalan cerita tandingan. Nah, nanti kawan-kawan yang tertarik untuk mengikuti ini silahkan hubungi Mbak Fadilati atau hubungi saya juga bisa nanti. Oke, terima kasih semuanya. Thank you for everyone. I will give the floor to Mbak Vera, the moderator. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Sangat menarik ya diskusi pada siang hari ini. Mau sore kalau di sini ya. Sekedar mengingatkan kembali untuk seluruh peserta bisa mengisi presensi baik mahasiswa PS Politik Lingkungan dan Sumber Daya Alam maupun peserta umum bisa segera mengisi form. Kemudian untuk seluruh peserta diharapkan untuk mengaktifkan kamera video ya, karena kita akan melakukan sesi foto bersama. Lihat tepuk tangan. Ya, sambil menunggu.
Pas foto semuanya muncul ya.
Emang seperti itu.
Menghemat kuota, Mas.
Biar fokusnya cukup ke pemateri saja, makanya yang lainnya off cam gitu, Pak. Ya, mungkin sambil menunggu teman-teman on cam juga, saya ucapkan terima kasih kepada seluruh panitia yang bertugas, kepada Ibu Genta Rozalina, kepada Bapak Anton Novenanto selaku dosen pengampu mata kuliah Politik Lingkungan dan Sumber Daya Alam, sekaligus Bapak Anton Novenanto juga selaku moderator. Terima kasih banyak juga kepada kedua narasumber hebat yaitu Bapak Anto Mohsin dan juga Bapak Pratama Yudha Pradheksa. Terima kasih atas waktu dan ilmunya. Mungkin teman-teman bisa segera mengaktifkan kamera ya. Screenshot akan dilakukan oleh Almira. Sudah siap ya, Almira?
Baik, berhubung di sini ada 4 slide, jadi saya akan screenshot banyak 4 kali. Dimulai dari slide yang pertama, diharapkan siap-siap ya. 1, 2, 3. Oke, slide kedua. 1, 2, 3. Oke, slide ketiga. 1, 2, 3. Dan slide terakhir. 1, 2, 3. Oke, udah selesai.
Nah, ternyata kita sudah sampai pada penghujung acara. Tidak terasa ya, sudah sore juga. Tak lupa saya ucapkan juga tadi belum saya ucapkan terima kasih kepada seluruh peserta yang telah hadir mengikuti kuliah tamu pada siang sampai sore hari ini dari awal sampai akhir. Sampai bertemu di lain kesempatan. Akhir kata, wallahul muwaffiq ila aqwamit thoriq. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih semuanya.
Salam, terima kasih.
Boleh live ya.
Waalaikumsalam, selamat sore. Terima kasih. Anto Mohsin.
Anto,
Terima kasih semuanya.
terima kasih Pak Anto.
Terima kasih Pak Anto. Terima kasih teman-teman semua.